My girlfriend's wealthy parents hated me before we'd even met. On my way to their mansion for the first time, I stopped to fix an old woman's vintage Rolls-Royce on the side of the road. I arrived an hour late, covered in grease, ready for them to throw me out. And then the woman I had just helped pulled up behind me. The drive to the Prescott estate had felt like a journey into another dimension. Sophia's voice still echoed in my head, a frantic whisper of warnings. Don't say you own a garage. Say you're in automotive management. If they ask about your hands, tell them you do woodworking. Please, Mark, just play the part. I had scrubbed my hands until they were raw, but the faint outline of grease beneath my fingernails remained a permanent map of my life's work. I was a mechanic, and I was proud of it. But to Richard and Eleanor Prescott, I was a social contaminant. Then I saw her. A two-toned 1960 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud was stalled on the gravel shoulder. Standing beside it was an elderly woman who looked like she'd stepped off a postage-stamped weed, pearls and a look of regal frustration. "Trouble, ma'am?" I asked, pulling over. "It made a dreadful clunking sound," she replied, her voice crisp and cultured. I took one look at the engine, a masterpiece of engineering, and forgot about the time. It was a frayed distributor wire. I stripped the wire, reconnected the lead, and wrapped it in electrical tape. My suit was ruined, and my hands were blackened. But when that V12 engine purred back to life, the woman's smile was worth it. "You are a miracle worker," she beamed. "How can I repay you?" "Just seeing her run is enough," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. I didn't realize then that I had just traded my reputation for hers. When I finally pulled my vintage pickup into the Prescott driveway, I was 70 minutes late. The mansion was a terrifying Georgian fortress of light and judgment. Sophia met me at the door, her face a mask of horror. "Mark, what happened?" she hissed, staring at my grease-stained sleeves. Before I could answer, Richard and Eleanor appeared. Richard was tall and silver-haired, his eyes cold as glass. Eleanor looked at me with a physical wince of disgust. "So," Richard drawled, "this is the mechanic?" "I am so sorry for my tardiness," I began. "There was an emergency on the road." "Punctuality is a requirement of respect," Richard interrupted, his voice cutting like a shard of ice. "A requirement you have failed. I think it's best if you leave before you soil the upholstery." I felt the sting of defeat. I turned to walk back into the night, my future with Sophia evaporating, when a familiar rumble vibrated through the air. The silver Rolls-Royce glided to a stop behind my truck. The driver opened the door, and the woman with the pearls stepped out. The change in the room was instantaneous. Richard and Eleanor went from lions to whimpering pups. "Mother?" Eleanor squeaked. "What are you doing in that old thing?" Matilda Prescott, the matriarch of the clan, ignored her daughter. She walked up the steps, her eyes scanning the scene. She saw my stained hands, then the arrogant sneers of her children. "Richard, Eleanor," Matilda said, her voice like a well-struck bell, "this young man spent an hour on a damp road fixing my car while your reliable driver was lost. You are throwing him out for the very qualities this family lacks: character and competence." The dinner that followed was a masterclass in poetic justice. Matilda insisted I sit at her right hand, the seat of honor Richard had coveted for decades. As the butler served roasted duck, Matilda turned her back on her children entirely, focusing her laser-like attention on me. "A silver cloud is temperamental, Mark," she said, ignoring Richard's attempts to talk about the stock market. "Tell me, how do you keep the pressure consistent in the fuel pump?" I spoke for the first time that night. I didn't hide. I talked about the soul of machinery, the art of hand-tooling parts, and the honesty of hard work. I wasn't a manager. I was a craftsman. Matilda listened with genuine hunger, while Richard and Eleanor sat in a sullen, humiliated silence. "Mark is a man who builds things," Matilda remarked, casting a withering glance at her son. "A concept I fear is becoming quite foreign to this household." As coffee was served, Matilda delivered the final blow. She explained that her late husband's collection of priceless, one-of-a-kind vehicles had been rotting in the West Garage for 20 years because no one in the family had the soul to care for them.
"I believe," she said with a triumphant glint in her eye, "I've found my new curator. We'll discuss the salary tomorrow, Mark. It will be quite generous." Richard looked as if he had been struck. The grease monkey they tried to evict was now the keeper of the family's most prized heritage, a new legacy. The months that followed were a revolution. Our wedding was beautiful, and while my in-laws' smiles were strained, they were impeccably polite. They were terrified of Matilda. I spent my days in the West Garage, a cathedral of automotive history. I never had to pretend to be a man of management again. In fact, Matilda insisted I invite the in-laws to the garage frequently, forcing them to watch me work, my hands covered in the noble grease of my trade. It was her own quiet, brilliant form of revenge on my behalf. One evening, Sophia and I took a restored 1965 Jaguar E-Type out for a drive. As the sun dipped below the hills, I thought back to that first night of dread. I had been so ready to hide who I was just to win their approval. And yet it was the one simple, authentic act of kindness, the act of a mechanic stopping to help a stranger, that had won me everything. I had not been accepted in spite of who I was. I had been welcomed, celebrated, and ultimately triumphant because of it. I had been true to myself, and in doing so had found a new and far better family, grease stains and all. Would you like me to adjust the tone of the dialogue, or perhaps expand more on the description of the vintage car collection? Thanks for listening. Like, comment what you would have done in that moment, and don't forget to subscribe to Huna Stories for more real-feeling revenge stories.